Hello again, college football fans. It is Sunday, September 24th, the day after the Week 4 goings on in college football, and most notably for this channel, obviously, is the Alabama-Ole Miss game. We spoke last week about what an important matchup this was going to be. This was a very important game. It was a big game. We've had bigger, obviously, in recent years, and but I do believe there's a difference in an important game and a big game. Important games mean that there seems to be some trouble in your program, or maybe even it's an upswing. Maybe you feel like you're on the verge of something big, and this game will be a good indicator of whether or not you're right about that. Well, since Alabama's pretty much been on top, any important games we've had since the Nick Saban era really kicked in have all been games where it seems like there might be some trouble on the horizon. And in my estimation, I would say that this game yesterday was probably our most important regular season game since 2015 against Georgia in Athens in the rain. That was a game that was very similar to this one that we played yesterday in the fact that it was a season that had started off rocky. We'd already suffered a loss at home. We'd played a little bit of quarterback carousel, and we're trying to figure out who we were. And that was the game where everything looked like it clicked, and we figured out who we were, and we went on to win a national championship that year. Now, I'm not predicting that that's what's going to happen this year, but fortunately for Crimson Tide fans, yesterday, especially in the second half, now, I'm full disclosure, I was really, really upset and really felt like maybe we weren't going to be able to figure out how to get out of our own way at any point this season during the first half, especially after the punt block when you get the ball on their 1 yard line, and then there's a bad snap, and we'll talk more about that later. Red zone woes just in general. I felt like the play calling was bad, and the plays that they called were executed poorly, and it was just looking really bad there for a minute. And then adjustments were made at halftime, and a switch seemed to be flipped during halftime of that game. And in a lot of ways, it is a switch that I have been looking for maybe 3 seasons now. In 2021, after Bryce's first start against Miami, I felt like we were on our way to a national championship that year. And Bryce was fabulous, and we got close. Injuries, of course, curtailed all that towards the end of the season. But you just saw chinks in parts of our team that you really hadn't seen all that much during the heyday of the Saban era. And it was chinks in the offensive line, very spotty, up and down, inconsistent play on the offensive line. And to be honest, the Pete Golding defense, the entire Pete Golding era, they never looked exactly right to me. Yeah, the numbers were okay as far as in terms of the whole nation and everything. Sure, we had top 15, top 10 type numbers. But first of all, we want top 5 numbers, and secondly, they just weren't clutch. In clutch situations, we seemed to always give up the big play, and we didn't have the same tenacity. They just didn't look the same. They didn't look like dogs. That's a big word that the kids like to use today. They just didn't play as much like dogs during the Pete Golding era as they did before that. And I think yesterday, there were glimpses of it early in the season, but I think yesterday's the first time I've really seen that in probably five seasons, since 2017 or 18. I know 18 was Tosh Lapoy, but or maybe 17 was Tosh Lapoy. I can't remember. But anyway, pre-Golding Lapoy era, I haven't really seen the defense look the way that it did, and that was a really welcome surprise. And I think that was the headline to be taken out of that game, is that Alabama's defense really does look like they might be back to vintage form. And that's great news, because that's usually the most important aspect of a team to me. The defense, how does the defense play, and what does the O-line look like? Those are the most important things. And now, so on the other side of the ball, first of all, I want to commend the coaching staff, and of course, Coach Saban is the top of that, because last week I criticized him a little bit by saying that, he's never really tailored an offense around a quarterback before, and I didn't expect that he would start now, but it looks like they may be doing that a little bit. I think that was a part of the adjustments that were made in halftime, because they weren't doing it so much in the first half. They were kind of going. I've noticed a pattern in our games this year, and it kind of goes back to the end of last year, really, where we are committed to the run really well at the beginning of the game, at the very beginning of the game. First drive, first part of the first drive, we're committed to the run. We run well. The old line looks well. And then we just start kind of slowly drifting and veering away from the run, and problems start happening. There's false starts. There's other kinds of penalties and things. And then maybe by the end of the game, in the second half, and certainly by the fourth quarter, we've gone back to committing to the run very much, and running play after play and doing well, and it kind of went back to that pattern yesterday. I'd like to see us maybe not have to go into that little lull there in the second quarter where we're trying to tweak things around and do things that Milroe just is not all that great at doing. And we talked about that last week. Intermediate passing where there's a lot of reads to be made, and a lot of that is just because the offensive line has not been able to hold up long enough for him to go through those reads. But some quarterbacks are quicker at that than others, and Milroe doesn't seem to be one of the quickest read guys that I've ever seen. So, but in the second half, they were doing what I felt like suits his game more. They were running him more. They were it was quick passes. They're probably telling him, if if the first or second read isn't there, then just see what you can get out of your legs. Get out of there. And there was one pass play I do remember where it clearly looked like he had gone through all of his reads, and he was probably already all the way to this fourth read, and it was Jace McClellan out of the backfield, the halfback. And it took him a minute to get over there. It took him longer than I would have liked, because, of course, I'm looking at it on the screen saying, my God, please throw it to Jace. Please throw it to Jace. He's wide open. And it probably would have been a little bit of a better play if he had gotten it out quicker, but he did get it over there eventually, and it was a good play, and it led to a touchdown, I believe, maybe the last touchdown. And so I want to see more of that. I want to see more short throws to the backs. I just want to see more commitment to the run game. And long passes. He's great. He's great at the long bomb, taking the top off of defenses, and that's running and taking the top off of the defense. That's what I want to see more of than anything, pretty much always. Now, a few more specific things offensively that I would like to see. I want to see more of the backup running backs. I want to see more of the younger running backs. I love Jace McClellan and I love Roydale Williams both. I think they're both very good backs, but they just don't have they're not great. They're not. And I'll say this, I don't think Alabama has had a great back since Najee Harris. B-Rob became a very, very good quarterback, a very, very good running back, and he served us well and had some good games and had a lot of production there towards the end of his career. But it took him a while to get there, and he never did get to that special running back mark. Maybe some of this has to do with just the way running backs are used in today's game are just not the way that they used to be used. Most of their runs are coming out of shotgun, which is different, and there's just not as many carries. There's not as much focus on running backs running the football anymore in NFL or college. And it started in the NFL. I mean, I remember back in the summer there was a big news story about some of the backs not getting the money that they thought they deserved. Bama backs were involved in that. Josh Jacobs, I remember Najee Harris put in his 2 cents about that. And so I just think that's a trend in the current version of football right now. Running backs just are not the feature that they were years ago, and they were huge. But that being said, I still don't think that Roydale or Jace McClellan are a special kind of back. Now, we've heard a lot or at least I heard a lot over the offseason about Justice Haynes. And he had the kind of talk surrounding him that I remember hearing about from, guys like Derrick Henry and Najee Harris and people like that. I didn't hear much about Josh Jacobs, but boy, he turned out to be a good one, didn't he? And obviously Mark Ingram and Trent Richardson and Eddie Lacy, and the list goes on and on. TJ Yeldon was a very highly touted guy. I felt like he was a little bit overrated for my book, but just a little bit, and it's just because I'm holding him against guys like Derrick Henry. I mean, come on. Derrick Henry is really up there. I don't think he gets a lot of the credit, but I don't think he gets quite as much credit as he deserves. I think he definitely deserves to be uttered in the same breath as Bo and Herschel. but he's kind of not. Like I said, that may have something to do with just the way running backs have been sort of diminished. Their role has been diminished a little bit as the years have gone on, but that's neither here nor there. So things like that, but what they did yesterday in the second half, that's exactly what I feel like they should have done, and the results showed that it's what they should be doing. Now, Milroe, I don't think, he hadn't thrown his last interception. He hasn't made his last mistake, but I do think he will continue to grow into that position, and I think he will continue to improve. Now, the biggest thing right now is the offensive line. It still is playing a little bit spotty, but it has improved yesterday. And I mean, think about it. We got a true freshman starting left tackle. The blind side of the quarterback is his left side, and people always argue that the left tackle is probably the most important position on the offensive line. I don't know. I think the center's got something to say about that, and that's another thing that's been a problem. Seth McLaughlin has had real problems snapping the ball out of the shotgun this year, and I wish he would either get better than that, or I wish that we could come up with some more packages that are out of the quarterback being under center. I mean, that was one of the things. That was why we couldn't get a touchdown after the punt block yesterday, is because the snap sailed over Milroe's head. And even before, I mean, as they were lining up, and I saw that it was in shotgun, I'm thinking to myself, my God, the ball's on the one. Can we please just get under center and maybe sneak it in, or just hand it off? I mean, so many bad things can happen, and sure enough, a bad thing happened, and we had to settle for a field goal out of that spot. And at that point in the game, I mean, it still seemed like, it seemed like that their offense was moving the ball on us a little bit, and obviously we couldn't know that we were going to totally shut them down in the second half, but we did. But offensive line, that's just been something that's been spotty the last couple of years, and I do feel like they are improving, and I feel like by the end of the year, they could be to the level that we wanted to be. But this is Alabama. I mean, we're talking about very high standards here. And I mention a lot that there are perceptions about this run that Saban has had at Alabama. Yeah, it's been wonderful and it's been great, but people still talk about it as though it was better than it really was. For example, just like this conversation about the O-line. Well, the O-line was not an all-timer of an O-line every year. I mean, really, 2012 and 2020, those were the clear years to me that our offensive line was clearly the best one in the country, and clearly one of the best ones in recent years in the game, and maybe of all time in the game. But that's 8 years separating those 2 years. I mean, it's just those kind of all-timer of O-lines don't come around very often, and even for a team at the elite level that Alabama is, it's still, you still have to wait about a decade for an O-line to be that great. Now, I'm not saying that any of the other ones were bad. Obviously, they weren't bad, but they just can't be perfect every year, or close to perfect every year. And so this is one of those years, and I am encouraged by the fact that our left tackle is a true freshman, and these guys, and we had Cohen, Javian Cohen left in the portal during the offseason, and he was a great stud that we really would have liked to have back, and I think we would look better already if he was still on that squad, but he's not, and we have to use what we have, and we have great players at every position on the offensive line. We have great players on the second string of every position on the offensive line. It's just a matter of continuity, and that unit takes a lot of playing together to get to their best, to get the best potential that they have. So I'm not too worried about that. I look for the offense to continue to improve. It's not going to be what it's been the last few years with Tua and Bryce Young and Mac Jones, but it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be like that every season to win a national championship. Now, I know that we have entered an era of college football where, yes, there are a lot more elite offenses than there used to be in terms of passing, but we can be a very good offense that is a good ball control offense, which is great. I love that. That's complementary to the defense. We keep the other team's offense off the field. We keep our defense rested. We use a lot of clock. Maybe we have to settle for more field goals than we're used to. Maybe we have to punt a little bit more than we're used to. But we're going to play that game this year, and that's a game Nick Saban is very familiar with. That's a game that Kevin Steele is familiar with, and that is a game that Tommy Rees is very familiar with, coming from Notre Dame, playing field position and ball control, and that's the most time-tested, time-proven way to win championships is ball control and great defense. And it looks like we're set up to do that this season. And the defense should continue to improve too. I don't think they've reached their ceiling. I mean, we have a true freshman starting at strong safety. That's a very, very important position, especially in Saban's defense. I would like to see some more blitzing from the middle linebackers, but that's another part of the game that is just evolved into a place that I don't really like. I don't like seeing middle linebackers in coverage most of the time. I feel like they would be better served blitzing the quarterback, because most of the time you see the quarterback, he's got 3 or 4 seconds to look around. And good quarterbacks, if you give them 3 or 4 seconds, they're going to find the open man. And I just feel like give him 1 second to find 3 open guys as opposed to give him 3 seconds to find 1 open guy seems to work out better. And I feel like we have the guys this year, and we've had the guys in past years. I mean, I felt like Christian Harris was a monster of a middle linebacker whose potential was really wasted at Alabama because he spent so much time in coverage, which is just not those guys' cup of tea. That's not what those guys are built for physically or mentally. They want to be going after the quarterback. They want to be going after the running backs, the guys with the ball. And coverage, half the time you see a middle linebacker in coverage, and he's not doing much better than the air surrounding the receiver. And I just think to myself, and then a big pass play goes down the field, and I always think to myself, now wouldn't it have been better for him to have been running after the quarterback instead of not covering very well? Now, I'm not to say that some middle linebackers are better than that than others, and I'm sure that that our guys are, I know that it's better for them to be able to do multiple things. But I just feel like in the long run, there should be more blitzing, especially with this team, because I don't think we're quite as strong on the middle part of our line as we have been in years past. Now, I do like a lot of the things that I've seen, especially from Tim Keenan III. I feel like he's the best middle defensive line, nose tackle, nose guard kind of guy up front. He's the only guy I've been able to see squirt through and put some pressure on a quarterback. And I like Tim Smith too. I've always liked Tim Smith, and he's always kind of been tagged with this run stopper moniker, but I think he's good. I think the two Tims in the middle I would like to see them there more. I know Jaheim Otis gets a lot of press and a lot of praise from guys around this sport, but honestly, I have not seen it. He's not bad. He has made some good plays, but I feel like Tim Keenan and Tim Smith are better, and I would like to see them out more. And I know that there's other guys. I mean, obviously there's Justin Eboigbe and Dale. It's not DJ Dale. There's a guy that's got a very similar name to guys at that position in years past, and I have a hard time remembering what it is. Maybe Hale. That's another thing I wanted to talk about, though. Aside from the young running backs, Justice Haynes, maybe he's a special running back. I was really glad to see Jalen Hale make the play that he made in that game, and he made a couple of good plays. And he looked fast, and he looked like maybe he's the guy. And we haven't, since Jamison Williams and John Mechie, we haven't had a guy that you could say is that guy at wide receiver. We got a lot of good ones, very, very deep wide receiver room. But, we need our Julio. We need our Calvin Ridley, our Amari Cooper. I mean, of course, we had 4 there with Judy and Ruggs and Waddle and Devontae Smith. And what an embarrassment of riches that was. But you got to have at least one of those guys, because they make the entire core better, because it forces defenses to focus on him, and it gives opportunities to other guys. And anyway, in summation, I was very pleased. That was one of the better feeling games that I have experienced in a while. It's been a while since I've gone into a game and Alabama outperformed by expectations. And they did. Not by much, but they did. It's like I said last week, don't be surprised if they overwhelm Ole Miss. And in the second half, they did. And now we've got a little bit of a breather, I think, next week. But, all that being said, we are still a young team that are trying to improve, and I still feel like there might be some inconsistency. So don't be at all surprised if we come out and struggle to exert our will over Mississippi State next week. And then, of course, the next week after that is a very scary game against Texas A&M, and we'll talk more about that stuff as we get to those dates. And seems like right now Sunday after the games on Saturday is when I've decided to do these. So be on the lookout on Sundays if you're interested. But I may do some other games. And eventually I'm going to talk about some other teams, certainly around SEC and around the country. But right now, Alabama is such an interesting team to watch. Watching all this improvement and development going on, it's very, very exciting, and I can't wait to see what this team looks like towards the end of the season. And it may well be to the point where I can call them a college football playoff contender by that point of the year. I'm still not ready to do that yet, but they've certainly answered my question the way that I thought it would be answered, which is they are 100% Western Division contender in the SEC, and for right now, that's good enough for me. Thanks for watching.